Nadia had rehearsed this moment 400 times. In the shower, on the tube, in the dark at 2 in the morning when her daughter kicked in her sleep, and Nadia lay there staring at the ceiling, counting the ways this could go wrong. She had rehearsed it until the words had no edges left on them, until they were smooth and cool and easy to hold. Get in, leave the papers. Get out, 20 minutes, maybe less. She had even packed light, just the envelope, her keys, one change of clothes for the girl in case of emergency, and the specific kind of resolve you build, not from courage, but from having no other option left. The resolve of someone who has already survived the hard part and is only here now to finish the paperwork. That's what she told herself on the drive. Paperwork. The car she'd rented was beige. She'd chosen it deliberately. Beige meant nothing. Beige meant temporary. Beige said, I am not staying. I do not belong here. I am a woman passing through on administrative business, and I will be gone before anyone has a reason to look twice. The packlands began where the motorway ended, where the road narrowed and the trees on either side grew thick enough to press against each other overhead, and the sky went from open gray to something darker and more intentional, like the land was making a decision about you. She had forgotten how green it was. That was the thing nobody warned you about. Not the gates, not the silence, not even the way the air changed the moment you crossed the boundary line, and your lungs knew, before your brain admitted it, that you were somewhere that remembered you. Nobody warned you about the green. The specific deep saturated green of the packlands in October, that was nothing like the gray green of the city parks she'd been taking her daughter to for 3 years. This green meant something. This green had been here before her and would be here long after, and it looked at her through the windscreen with the patience of something that had been waiting. She kept her eyes on the road. In the back seat, under a yellow blanket that had been washed so many times it had gone soft as skin, her daughter slept. 2 years old, 3 months, and 4 days. She had thick, dark hair that grew in exactly the wrong direction, no matter what Nadia did to it in the mornings, and her mouth made a small, serious shape when she slept, like she was working through a problem. She always looked like she was working through a problem. Even as a newborn in the hospital, when Nadia had held her for the first time in that blurry, exhausted silence, the baby had looked up at her with that same expression, studying, measuring, deciding. She had her father's eyes. Nadia had known it from the first day and had spent 2 years and 3 months trying to not know it, which is the kind of thing that costs you. One of the girl's red shoes had fallen off sometime in the last hour and was sitting against the inside of the car door. Nadia could see it in the mirror. She did not stop to put it back on. The girl was asleep. The shoe was fine. The shoe was not the thing she needed to be thinking about right now. The gates appeared. They were the same. Of course they were the same. 3 years was nothing to iron and stone. But something in her had hoped they might have changed. Some small mercy in the form of a different color, or a new crest, or some renovation that would give her the exit of not recognizing them. They opened before she reached them. She hadn't touched anything, hadn't rolled down the window. They simply opened, the way they had always opened for her, back when she'd lived here, and the opening had felt like welcome, and now felt like something she didn't have a clean word for. She hated that. She pulled through. The packlands were, she had no other word for it, intact. That was what struck her as she drove the long road up to the main house. Everything was intact. The grounds were managed. The secondary buildings she passed looked occupied. Whatever she had expected to find on the other side of 3 years. Some evidence that things had suffered in her absence. Some visible decay that would have made a small, shameful part of her feel less replaceable. It wasn't here. The place had continued without her. As places do. As everything does. She parked where she used to park, because muscle memory is a traitor, and her hands knew the way before her mind could redirect them. She sat in the car for 43 seconds. She knew it was 43 because she counted. Then she picked up the envelope. Thick, cream-colored. Her signature on every page. His name printed at the top where the solicitor had addressed it with a formality that had made her throat close the first time she'd seen it. And she got out of the car. She cracked the back window 2 inches. The air was cold but not dangerously cold. The girl was asleep. The yellow blanket was pulled up to her chin. 20 minutes, Nadia said to no one. She walked to the house. The staff member who met her at the door was someone she didn't recognize, which was a small relief. Young woman, professional, a face with no history in it. She took one look at the envelope in Nadia's hand and said, with the careful neutrality of someone who had clearly been briefed on exactly this scenario, "He's in the East Room. I'll take you." Nadia noted the phrasing. He's in the East Room. Not the study, not the drawing room, the room they had used together for 3 years, where the bookshelves went floor to ceiling and there was a chair by the window that Nadia had claimed as hers within the first week of being here and that Cale had never once sat in even when she wasn't using it. He had given it to her like it was nothing, like furniture could be given, like chairs had owners. The East Room was his war room. She had been in it twice, both times during pack business she wasn't supposed to be involved in and was anyway. It was a room built for decisions. No comfortable chairs, no shelf of books you read for pleasure, a table that could seat 20 and usually held 6, maps, records, the kind of room where things got settled. He had moved the center of his life away from where they used to sit. She noted this. She told herself it meant nothing. She walked through corridors that smelled the same, stone and cedar and something underneath that she couldn't name, and had spent 3 years trying to forget. And she counted her steps because that was the kind of person she was in difficult situations. A counter, a list maker, a person who, when the world went unreliable, reached for numbers the way other people reached for hands. The staff member opened the East Room door, stood back, said nothing. Nadia walked in. He was at the window, back to her, both hands loose at his sides. The window looked out over the western grounds, the old training fields, and the October sky had gone the color of iron, and he was standing in front of it like he'd been placed there, like something had arranged him. She had 43 seconds of knowing he was in the room before he turned around, and she used every one of them. 3 years had not, she hated this. 3 years had not done what she'd needed them to do to him. She had done a lot of work in 3 years. She had rebuilt. She had found a flat in a city that didn't know her name. She had learned to do the school run and the grocery shop and the 2 in the morning wake-ups alone, and she had built something that functioned, something that held its shape, something she was genuinely proud of. She had worked. She could see by the line of his shoulders that he had also worked, just not in any of the ways that would have made this easier. She put the envelope on the table. She said, "I only need your signature." He didn't turn around. She waited. She was good at waiting. She had learned it here, actually. Waiting was a pack skill, patience taught through repetition, and she stood with her hands loose at her sides and her face doing nothing useful, and she waited. He said, "Sit down, Nadia." His voice. She had forgotten. No, she hadn't. She had refused. There is a difference, and she knew the difference, and now was not the time to examine it. "I'm not staying," she said. "I have," she stopped. "I just need the signature. It's all set up. You only have to sit down." She did not sit down. He turned around. She had a half-second to take inventory before her face had time to catch up, and what she saw was the same. He was the same in all the ways that mattered, and different in the smaller ones. A haircut that had grown out slightly, a line at the corner of his left eye that might have been new, the jacket a different cut than she remembered. But the way he stood was the same. The way he occupied a room was the same. The specific stillness of him, the quality of his attention, the thing that happened to the air when Cale was concentrating, all of it was the same. Men like him did not age the way people hoped. He looked at her. She looked at the envelope on the table. "You look well," he said. "Thank you," she said. "The papers. How long have you been back in the country?" It wasn't a question. He already knew. She could see it in the way he was standing, that faint adjustment in posture that meant he had already done his research and was now doing the politeness of asking. 3 weeks, she said. "You came from Leeds." "I don't want to." "You've been in Leeds for 8 months." He paused. "Before that, Edinburgh." She picked the envelope up off the table. "Put it down again. Are you tracking me?" "I was." "And you didn't. You told me not to look." He said this without inflection. Like a fact about the weather. I found you 7 times. 7 times I had your location. I didn't act on it once." He paused again. Longer this time. That seemed like the thing you'd ask for. She stared at the envelope. 7 times. She had been so certain she was invisible. She had moved carefully. Changed her name on the rental agreements. Paid cash where she could. Kept her face off anything searchable. She had been so certain. 7 times. "Why didn't you?" she said. Not a challenge. Just, the question was there, and it had to go somewhere. "Because you left," he said. "And you left on purpose. And you are not a woman who does things by accident." The room was very quiet. She had nothing to say to that. She had everything to say to that, and no version of it that came out right. "I came to get a signature," she said. "I know why you came." Then, "Sit down, Nadia. Please." She sat down. Not in the chair she might have chosen. Not across from him, which would have felt too much like a negotiation. She sat at the side of the long table, angled slightly away, and put the envelope in front of her, and kept one hand on it, the way people keep one hand on things they're not sure of. He didn't move from the window. "You're not going to sign them today," she said. He said nothing. "That's what this is," she said. "You're going to draw it out. Make me, I don't know, make me come back. Multiple visits. A process." She heard her voice going flat and dry and let it. "That's what this is." "That's not what this is." "Then what?" He looked at her for a long moment. He had always been better at silence than her. He weaponized it so naturally she didn't think he knew he was doing it. Silence as the absence of information. Silence that forced the other person to fill it, to say too much, to show their hand. She knew this about him. She had known it for years. She still sat there and felt the pull of it like a current. She said nothing. He said, "Why did you leave?" "Cale, I know the story I told myself for 3 years. I want yours." She looked at her hand on the envelope. "This isn't one conversation. That's all I'm asking for. One honest conversation, and then, whatever you need, whatever you decide, I won't fight it." He paused. "But I'm not signing anything without knowing why you left. You know why I left. I know what the note said. The note. 12 words. I'm sorry, don't look. This is the only way I know." She had written it 4 times and chosen the shortest version because she had been afraid that if she wrote more she would stay. "The note was the reason," she said. "The note was a note." He finally moved from the window. Not toward her. He sat at the far end of the table, which she recognized as deliberate, as a kind of consideration she hadn't asked for. "Give me the actual reason." She looked at her hand. She looked at the envelope. She said, "Derek's people came to me in February. 3 years ago, February, the week after the summit." She heard her own voice come out very even and correct, the voice she used for professional things, the voice that didn't cost anything. They were very clear. The Alpha King needed a proper heir, a full blood, a name-bearer. She paused. They were very clear about what would happen if he had one by the wrong woman instead. The room went quiet in a different way. "They gave me 2 weeks," she said, "to make a decision." She heard him breathe. She kept her eyes on her hand, on the envelope. "I was already," she stopped. "I had already found out. The week before. I hadn't told you yet. I was trying to figure out how." She paused. "And then they came, and I realized that telling you would make it worse. If they knew you knew, they'd—" She stopped again. "I wasn't willing to bet on the odds." The silence after that was enormous. She had rehearsed this too. She had rehearsed saying it out loud. She had rehearsed the way her face would stay still and professional. She had rehearsed the voice that didn't cost anything. None of the rehearsal had accounted for what it felt like to say it in the actual room to the actual person. She focused on the envelope. He said, "Nadia, don't," she said. "I need you to—" "I know what you're going to say," her voice held. "You're going to say you would have handled it. You're going to say you would have protected. And maybe you would have. Maybe you're right. But Cale, I was 3 weeks along, and they were 3 men in my kitchen at 11 at night, and I calculated the odds, and I made a decision." She finally looked up. "I would make it again," his face. She looked away. The door opened, no knock. Doors don't knock when they're opened by someone who doesn't know that's the thing you do. The door opened at approximately the level of a door handle if you are an adult, and approximately the level of a stretched arm if you are 2 years old, 3 months, and 4 days. And it opened not all the way but enough for a small person to edge through sideways, with a yellow blanket trailing from one hand and a red shoe held in the other, the shoe located presumably after waking and finding the foot cold. She stood in the doorway. She was wearing one shoe. She had her mother's stubborn mouth and the hair that grew wrong, and her father's exact expression when entering a room for the first time. That specific inventory, that measuring stillness, cataloging everything before she moved. She stood there and she looked at Nadia with relief, and then she looked, very slowly, at the large person sitting at the far end of the table. She went quiet, not afraid. Nadia knew what her daughter looked like when she was afraid, the small tight mouth, the way she reached for Nadia's leg. This wasn't that. This was something else. This was the specific silence of someone encountering a thing they don't have words for yet, but recognize somewhere underneath the words. The girl held the red shoe out toward Nadia. Nadia stood up. She did not look at Cale. She could feel him without looking. She could feel the quality of his stillness change, the way a building goes still before something in its structure gives. And she didn't look, because looking would mean seeing his face, and seeing his face right now was not something she could do and keep the voice that didn't cost anything. "I told you to wait in the car," Nadia said. She said it gently because the girl was 2, and the girl had woken up alone in a car in a strange place, and done the sensible thing. The girl pointed at Nadia's hand. She meant, the shoe. "Give me the shoe to carry." This was one of her things. She liked carrying things. Nadia crouched down and took the shoe from her daughter and held it. She was now holding a small red shoe with a scuff on the toe in one hand and the dissolution of her marriage in the other hand, and she was crouching on the floor of the east room in the pack house. And she very specifically needed, to not be looking at Cale right now, so she focused on the shoe. She hadn't noticed it before. It was recent. The rubber at the front right corner had caught on something and left a pale mark across the red. She should clean that. She could clean it at the hotel tonight. She had. Did she have shoe polish? She didn't think she had shoe polish. She could pick some up on the way. Small brush. The right color red. She could sort the shoe tonight, and then tomorrow she would. "What is her name?" His voice. She straightened up. She stood there with the shoe and the envelope, and her face, doing what it had learned to do over 2 years and 3 months of mornings where she needed to function before she was ready to function. And she looked at Cale. He had not moved from his chair. He was sitting very still the way he always went very still when something mattered, but he was looking at the girl. The girl was looking back at him with the serious problem-solving expression she had used on the world since day one. "Zara," Nadia said. He said it once, quietly. "The way you say something you're deciding is yours." The next hour was the longest of Nadia's life, and she had had some long ones. A member of staff appeared. She suspected Cale had some way of communicating that she'd never worked out, and took Zara very gently in the direction of the kitchen, where, it emerged, there were biscuits. Zara went because there were biscuits. The yellow blanket went with her. The red shoe, which Nadia was still holding, did not. She stood in the east room, holding a single child's shoe. Cale stood up. He walked to the window again, which was his way of doing something with the energy that had nowhere else to go. She remembered this about him too. The window was where he went when he needed to not put his feelings into something he'd regret. She sat back down. She put the shoe on the table. She put the envelope next to the shoe. She looked at them both. "The faction," he said. "Derak's people. The 3 men in your kitchen." "Yes. February. 3 years ago. Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I removed Darak 14 months ago," he said. "His full network. The 2 men who were most likely in your kitchen are no longer a variable." He paused. "The pack has been cleaned since March of last year." She absorbed this. 14 months. She had been in Edinburgh 14 months ago. She had been in a top-floor flat with a second-hand crib and blackout curtains and a daughter who had just started pulling herself up to stand using the bars of the crib, and the pack had already been clean. You didn't know. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know where you were. He paused. I found you twice after that, after March. I still didn't act on it. Why? Because you said don't look. He turned around. And because I was afraid. She looked at him. In 3 years, she had imagined this conversation in about 40 different versions, and in not one of them had he used that word. Afraid of what? She said. That you'd left for a different reason. He held her gaze. That Derek's people were the thing you told yourself, so you wouldn't have to say the real thing. The room was very quiet. Cale, I'm not accusing you. I'm telling you what I was afraid of. He moved away from the window. Not toward her, toward the chair he'd been sitting in, which he gripped the back of instead of sitting. I had 7 locations and I didn't use a single one because I was afraid the answer was worse than not knowing. She looked at her hands. It wasn't a different reason, she said. He said nothing. I left because of exactly what I told you. I left because 3 men came into my kitchen and made things very clear, and I had a decision to make, and I made it. She paused. And yes, we were in a difficult, the year before wasn't, but that wasn't why I left. That's not what the note was about. Okay, he said. She looked up. Don't just, I believe you, he said. That's what okay means. She stared at him. He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. Sorry, he said. I know that comes across as what? Short. It comes across as very short, yes. I believe you, he said again, more carefully. I should have said more than that. I'm still processing. She almost laughed. She pressed her lips together and looked at the shoe instead. Processing. The alpha king of the largest pack network in the country, with a reputation that made other alphas rearrange their calendars, sitting in his war room telling her he was processing. When was she born? He said. June. She picked up the shoe. She did not know she was going to pick it up until she did. June 14th. He did the maths. She watched him do the maths, and his face do something careful and controlled with what the maths told him. She's mine, he said. Not a question. Yes. You know this. Cale. She gave him a look. Right, he said. Sorry, right. The biscuits apparently took some time, or Zara was being extremely thorough about them, because she did not come back for another 40 minutes. Those 40 minutes were. Nadia would not have been able to explain them to anyone later, would not have found the right shape for them. They were not a good 40 minutes. They were not a bad 40 minutes. They were a strange, suspended kind of 40 minutes, in which 2 people who had spent 3 years being very certain about something sat in a room and discovered that certainty had an expiry date. He told her what had happened after she left. He told it plainly, the way he told everything, no extra weight on any of it, no performance of how it had been. She listened to a plain recounting of a man who came downstairs to a house that had changed overnight, and she held the red shoe in her lap and she listened. She told him about Edinburgh, about Leeds. She told him about the flat with the blackout curtains and the second-hand crib, and the woman downstairs who had been retired and kind and had sat with Zara on 3 separate occasions so that Nadia could sleep. She did not tell him about the nights. She did not think she needed to. She thought he already knew about those, in the way that people who have had their own version of the same nights know. You were alone, he said, not as a criticism, just naming it. Yes, for all of it. The woman downstairs, for the big parts. She looked at the shoe. Yes, she said. He was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, he said. I know that's not. He stopped. I don't have the right scale of words for it, but I'm sorry. She did not say it was fine because it wasn't fine, and lying about it at this point seemed like too much effort. I know, she said. I know you are. Zara came back, trailing biscuit crumbs, and a member of staff who looked slightly frazzled and also slightly charmed in the way that everyone who spent 20 minutes with Zara ended up slightly charmed. She walked directly to Nadia, climbed onto Nadia's lap without ceremony, because that was what she did. She did not ask. She simply chose where she was going and went there, which was a habit that was going to cause problems when she got older, but right now was mostly just efficient. She settled on Nadia's lap and looked at Cale. He looked back. It was, Nadia thought, possibly the most serious conversation conducted entirely in eye contact she had ever witnessed, and she had sat through some very serious pack meetings. Zara held up her remaining biscuit. She was offering him half. He looked at the biscuit. He looked at Zara. Something moved across his face that he didn't manage to stop in time. "Thank you," he said. Zara considered this. Then she broke the biscuit and held out the smaller piece in his direction, apparently having decided that gratitude was worth the smaller half, but not the larger one. Nadia looked at the window. She did not cry. She was not going to cry in this room. She was not going to cry with the envelope still sitting on the table unsigned, and the shoe in her lap, and 3 years of whatever this was, sitting in the room with them. She looked at the window, and she breathed. Cale crouched down. He was a large person doing a deliberate thing with his own size, making himself smaller, slower, less. He crouched down at Zara's level and took the smaller piece of biscuit with both hands, like it was something serious, and said "thank you" again, and Zara ate her half of the biscuit and watched him with the expression of someone running a very thorough assessment. Then she said, "You're big." He said, "Yes." She said, "We have biscuits at home, but they're different." He said, "What kind?" She thought about this with real effort. "Round," she said finally. "These are round," he said. She considered this. "Different round," she said. He looked up at Nadia. There was something on his face that she'd only seen there a handful of times in the years she'd known him, and it was not an expression she had a word for, but she knew what it meant. She'd always known what it meant. She looked at the envelope, she looked at the shoe, she looked at the table. Zara had reached out and was touching Cale's hand with 2 fingers, not holding it, just touching, the way children test the temperature of things. He held still. He did not reach for her. He let her decide. "She does that," Nadia said, because she needed to say something. "What is she doing?" he said. "Deciding," Nadia said. He looked at his hand. Zara apparently decided something, because she climbed off Nadia's lap without warning. Nadia grabbed her instinctively, steadied her, then let her go, and she walked the 3 steps to where Cale was crouched and stood in front of him and held out her arms. She wanted to be picked up. He looked at Nadia. Nadia said, with a voice that came out very even and completely honest, "You can." He picked her up. He was careful about it in a way that meant he had thought about it. 2 large hands, slow, making sure she had time to change her mind. She didn't change her mind. She settled against his shoulder with the particular bonelessness of a toddler who has decided someone is trustworthy, and she looked around the room from the new height with obvious satisfaction. Nadia looked at the window for a long time. The afternoon went in a direction she had not planned. Someone brought tea. She wasn't sure when she'd agreed to tea, but the tea was there, and Zara had been put down on a floor covered quickly with a large meeting room chair's throw that became an impromptu play surface, and somehow there were also some stacking rings that had materialized from somewhere that Nadia was choosing not to question. Cale sat across from her. They drank tea. "She's going to be trouble," he said. "She's already trouble," Nadia said. "She can open any child-proof lock you have invented. I've had to move everything." "Where to?" "Everywhere higher. She worked out the dining chair by 18 months, so now honestly, it's a full project. Every morning I do a sweep." He was quiet for a moment. "Tell me about her," he said. So she did. She told him about the look, the one that meant she was deciding. She told him about the child-proof locks, and the chair she'd figured out to climb, and the very serious way she approached biscuits that were a different kind of round. She told him about the morning she'd found Zara sitting on the kitchen floor with a bag of pasta she'd retrieved from a bottom cabinet, sorting the pieces by shape, very methodically, at 6 in the morning, that she'd gone back and forth on it and decided because she wanted something that was hers, not Nadia's family's names and not. She stopped. "Not mine," he said. "I didn't say that. It's okay. I didn't say that." She looked at him. "I wanted something that was hers. Just hers. Nothing she'd have to explain or carry. Zara. It means radiance." She paused. It felt right. He said it again, quietly, the way he'd said it the first time. She looked at her tea. "I brought her," she said. "Today. I want you to know it It wasn't a tactic. She was asleep, and I thought she'd stay asleep, and the plan was 20 minutes, and then she was— I know it wasn't a tactic. I need you to know that. Nadia. He waited until she looked at him. I know you. She looked at him for a long moment. You knew me, she said. It's been 3 years. Yes, he said. I know. The room held that. The envelope was still on the table. It had been on the table for 3 hours now, migrating slightly as the afternoon rearranged itself. Pushed toward the edge when the tea arrived, moved aside when Zara had climbed back up onto Nadia's lap and grabbed at the closest interesting thing and had to be redirected toward the stacking rings instead. It sat at the corner of the table now, a little rumpled from travel, her name printed on the back flap where she'd written it in her own handwriting in the solicitor's office 6 weeks ago. Cale looked at it. He had been looking at it with the same regularity all afternoon. Not constantly, but the way you look at something you know you have to deal with eventually, with the specific attention of the not yet. She waited. Zara had fallen asleep again. She was in Nadia's lap with her head tucked under Nadia's chin and the yellow blanket back around her, which had appeared from somewhere, the car presumably, brought by someone on Cale's staff with no specific instruction necessary because the staff in this place were very good at anticipating the things they were not told. Nadia had one arm around her daughter and one hand on the table near the envelope, and she waited. I'm not going to sign them today, he said. I know, she said. That's not me trying to delay or— I know, Cale. He looked at her. I need, he said, and stopped. He started again. I need time to— there's a lot of things to— there are things I need to look at differently now, and I need some time to do that. He paused. Can you give me that? She should have said, I'll be at the hotel in the village for the next 2 days. After that, I'm back in Leeds. After that, you can reach me through the solicitor. Clean, professional, the thing she had rehearsed. She said, how much time? I don't know, he said. I'm being honest. She looked at Zara's hair, the way it grew in the wrong direction. She pushed a piece of it back from her daughter's forehead, and it immediately went back where it wanted to be. I'm at the hotel in the village, she said. For 2 nights. He nodded. She picked up the envelope. She held it for a moment. She put it back on the table, closer to him. You don't have to sign it tonight, she said, but I'm leaving it here. It's yours to have. She looked at him. Whatever you decide. He looked at the envelope. He didn't pick it up. She stood up, shifting Zara carefully, settling her against her shoulder. The girl made a sound in her sleep, the small protest of someone briefly disturbed, and then went boneless again, heavy and warm. I'll reach out tomorrow, he said. Not a question. Okay, she said. She picked up the red shoe from the table, the one with the scuff. She would deal with that tonight. She walked to the door. She stopped. She did not turn around. She has your hands, she said. You'll see it when she's older. The way she holds things. Careful, both hands. She heard him breathe. She walked out. The drive back to the hotel took 11 minutes. Zara slept the whole way. She had both shoes on. Someone on staff had located the fallen one and returned it with no comment, which was the kind of thing that told you everything about how a house was run. Nadia drove the beige rental car through the narrowing road and out of the packlands and back onto the motorway, and she counted the white lines on the road the way she counted things when the numbers were the only reliable thing. She got to the hotel. She parked. She sat in the car. She thought about the East Room. She thought about the envelope on the table. She thought about a man crouching down to take the smaller piece of biscuit with both hands like it was a serious thing. She thought about a compass on a desk and a small person examining it with the focused intensity of someone who had her father's habits and did not know it yet. She thought about the words, "It knows what it's looking for." She had not heard him say that. She had been walking out of the room. She had not heard it. She was reconstructing it from the architecture of the moment, the way the room had held itself, the look on his face when she'd turned with Zara in the doorway, the specific quality of the silence after she'd said, "She has your hands." She thought about the envelope, still on the table, not signed, not picked up. She looked at the hotel through the windscreen. She looked at Zara in the mirror. One shoe, two shoes, both shoes on, the serious small face, the hair going in the wrong direction. she thought about 7. 7 locations. 7 times he had her. 7 times he had put it down and walked away from it, because she had written "don't look" in a note she'd left on a kitchen table at 4 in the morning, and he had taken that seriously in a way that she could not make that into a small thing. She had tried. She had spent 3 years making it small and manageable and putting it in the box where she kept the things she was not going to deal with, and it was not small. It had never been small. She got out of the car. She got Zara out of the car, heavy and warm and complaining quietly, one hand fisted in Nadia's collar. She carried her daughter through the hotel door and down the corridor to their room, and she put her on the bed and pulled the yellow blanket over her and took the red shoe off and put it on the bedside table. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the room. The anonymous, careful hotel room with its anonymous furniture and its window overlooking a car park, and the distant tree line of the pack lands at the edge of it, just visible in the last of the October light. She had a plan. The plan had been specific. The plan had involved 20 minutes, a signature, and the clean end of a thing. The plan had not. The plan had not accounted for biscuit halves. The plan had not accounted for 7 locations and a war room and the East room instead of the drawing room and the compass on the desk. The plan was, she was beginning to accept, no longer the operative framework. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. She typed a message, deleted it, typed a different one. She sent it. It said, "The shoe has a scuff. I need shoe polish tomorrow. Red. I don't know where to get it here." She stared at the phone. Her phone lit up. 30 seconds. No more. It said, "I'll have something sorted for the morning." She looked at the message. She put the phone face down on the bedside table. She lay down next to her daughter on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to Zara breathe, steady and even and completely unbothered, the way children breathe when they have done the thing they've decided to do and are satisfied with how it went. The envelope was on his table. She had not taken it back. The ceiling was white and ordinary and told her nothing, and she looked at it for a long time, and Zara kicked in her sleep and rolled sideways and put one hand flat on Nadia's arm, the way she always did in the night, finding her mother without waking, just locating and holding. Nadia put her hand over her daughter's small hand. Outside, the packlands were dark and intact and green in a way you couldn't see in the dark, but that she knew was there. She did not sleep for a long time. When she did not dream. In the morning there would be things to figure out. There were always things to figure out. She was good at that. The figuring, the lists, the counting. She would wake up and make a list, and it would have items on it, and she would work through the items and something would resolve. For now there was just the ceiling, and the sound of her daughter breathing, and the way the dark outside the window sat against the tree line of a place that had opened its gates before she even reached them, as it always had, as it apparently still did. End. That's your full single-part story, written in natural, human-centered prose, with dual emotional currents running throughout, object displacement, and the ending held deliberately open. No headings break the flow. Let me know if you'd like any section deepened, the voice adjusted, or a continuation from the morning after.